Right now, you're hearing music I made with my new Ableton Live pack called Baby Baby Grand. Baby Baby Grand is made from samples of this little toy grand piano I found at the local thrift store. The piano caught my eye right away. Cute little thing, all white. It's not the greatest sounding instrument, but I had a feeling I could make some cool sounds in Ableton Live, and that's exactly what I did. There are a total of 8 instrument racks, each with 5 different macro presets for a total of 40 sounds that you can use in your music. And there's also this pretty cool audio effect rack I made for the pack that is included as well. I feel really excited about this pack because it's a great example of how you can take sounds that might not be so great on their own, like this toy piano. It's not really a playable instrument, but if you sample it and then manipulate them properly, you can come up with unique sounds you may have never had before. And that's what I'm trying to do, is bring you unique sounds for your unique sound. And I think the Baby Baby Grand does a great job of that. You can find it at my website, brianfunk.com. You can also get this by joining my music production club. That's where you get my latest creations as soon as they're released at a fraction of the normal cost. And you get access to a ton of Ableton Live packs, my educational materials, templates, samples. And one of the coolest things about the club is the community. We've got a really nice Discord full of supportive and encouraging people that'll help you make music. We've got musical challenges and compilations you can become a part of. And we also have our live meetings where we get to talk about making music. That's the Music Production Club, brianfunk.com/MPC. And you've been listening to the Baby Baby Grand Ableton Live Pack. Hello, welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have Phil Shore and Pat Butler of Butler. They're from, you guys are in Astoria, Queens, right? So we're kind of nearby each other here
yes,
in New York.
Yeah, I live in Queens. Phil lives in Brooklyn. I used to live in Brooklyn, so we just say we're from Brooklyn still. But
right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's a little more magical sounding.
Yes.
A lot of people from Long Island say we're from New York City. It's like,
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
We'll let you have it. But it's great to have you guys here. I've been enjoying the music that you guys have put together. Also, just some of like the philosophical stuff behind what you do. You guys are childhood friends, and you go way back and have a lot of history of collaborating together, which I think is going to be fun to talk about. So, yeah, it's cool to have you guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, you guys were just telling me right before we started, you just kind of finished up touring recently?
Yes. For most of May and June, we were on tour in Europe and in North America, like US and Canada, obviously. And just it went by pretty quickly, and we were like,
first time playing in Europe too. So
yeah. First time playing in Canada.
Exciting.
So,
yeah.
Very
long days, fast weeks type of thing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
For sure.
And it was a tour that was booked to fly, but we were the opener and we didn't have the budget to fly to every show, so we drove. So we had some like 12-hour drives, pulling up to the venue and then rushing on stage after, a really long drive. So
we were like, what was it? Was it Seattle to LA or Seattle to San Francisco? We were like, oh yeah, like that's a day. And then it's like we're cruising.
Like 13-hour drive.
Yeah, cruising.
Yeah, so. In relation to like us in New York, you think, it's on the West Coast. It's like right next to it, but that's a long West Coast out there.
Oh yeah.
But it's interesting. Like it's just, unless you tour or you happen to road trip a lot, like in this country, you don't realize like even we grew up in Buffalo, same state, but it's like between a 7-8 hour drive, and even people from here, from like the area are like, oh yeah, that's not far, right? And it's like, no, it's actually really far. So it's just there's a lot of space in this country. So.
My buddies and I got a taste of the distance to Buffalo when we were younger. We went to see Weezer play
wow.
around like the year 2000. So they were kind of like, they had their first 2 records and then they kind of stopped for a little while and then they came back. So we were really excited. We wanted to see him again. And we're like, it's in Buffalo. It's in New York. How far?
Right.
And
Right.
it was like much further than we anticipated. And
Right.
I think we had like MapQuest directions, so we didn't have any
Yeah.
real sense of the distance.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like it's so much more Canada than it is New York City.
We went to Niagara Falls.
Nice. Yeah.
We decided we're here.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So your live show, is it a 2-man electronic kind of setup there? Do you have anyone else that plays with you?
No.
We do not.
Yeah, it's just us.
Yeah.
And it's mostly Pat playing a lot of guitar and bass and singing a lot. And then I'm kind of playing a lot of synths. And he's got a push next to him. I've got the laptop next to me. And we do like drum pads and stuff, but it's still, 90% of like the drums is all pre-programmed backing drums and stuff. And then we try to play, besides the drums, it's mostly stuff we're playing. So, we try to keep it as live as possible. Not really. I think it's interesting to watch when you're playing live, but it's also a lot of like, it's more fun to be, the songs, like we used to be a lot less live and it was just kind of like boring to like turn one knob for like the whole song,
Right.
So yeah, we try to make it like as live and have like that aura of danger as well, that like there's always the aura of the technology failing, which is less alluring, but just the aura of like we're musicians, like hopefully like playing on the edge of, it could all fall apart at any moment, trying to like capture that, which is difficult obviously when you're playing to backing tracks and that. So yeah.
Yeah, it was cool too, like a lot of the sounds, even let's say like there's a bass part that is a synthesizer on the recording or whatever. It's like we actually weren't super precious about like making everything sound exactly the same. We're like, oh, it'd actually be cool if like I played this on bass guitar and it's like a sidechain pumping, sine bass sound, but like how do we recreate that on a bass guitar? And it's like that has been really fun because in the past we would have just been like, okay, for this bass part I'll hold like one note on a key and it'll do that, whereas like now for example I'm like playing the like
thrashing
sort of
around
exactly
and playing it on a bass
exactly.
And it really influenced, I think, like looking back at how we made our record. If we had done this tour before then, we would have actually probably changed our whole process of recording and actually not just like typed in a MIDI note and like had a sine wave, but been like, all right, Pat, you're going to play this sine. It's like a bass, through like a ridiculous compression and distortion and like a filter. And it sounds like a sine wave. How much different doesn't even really sound. I don't know. But like the process feels different. And so the end result, will be different, so.
Right. And certainly on stage.
Yeah, for playing an instrument versus dragging the mouse across the screen.
Right.
Yeah.
And then too, you end up just changing. I feel like when typing in MIDI notes obviously is really convenient and great, but also it makes you don't actually play through the whole part. So like when you're performing the instrument, like you have that time in your performance to think about what you're doing and to like really listen to what you're doing versus just being like, oh, like I'm going to copy and paste this MIDI thing a bunch. And then like, that's the part.
Right.
It forces, I think, more, you just to be more not precise about what you're doing, but like thoughtful about what you're doing, so.
Right. Yeah.
Which we didn't do on the record, but now we realize it's a good idea to do that,
Right.
So.
Well, it's cool how the performance informs how you want to do things next time. You have like your recordings. I would imagine you probably use elements of that in your live performance some of that gets brought in, or is it a complete reimagining of what you have on the recording?
We're playing to either, there's a lot of parts that are backing, like the drums, all that kind of stuff. A lot of the sounds, though, like you play a lot of all of the synth bass lines. I'm pretty sure you play. If a bass line isn't being played by you, I'm playing it on bass guitar, or I guess on a keyboard too. But
most of the drums are the stems from the mixes. And then even, I mean, a lot of this, so we used to play, and we would bring, I'd have like 4 different keyboards, and I would actually be, synthesizing all of the keyboard parts. But for this tour, because we were flying a bunch, we cut down a ton. So like for all the synth parts that I did, I had the modular and then just a MIDI controller. So I actually did, I know we just said we weren't precious about the sounds, which we weren't, but I did like a lot of the bass parts that I would be playing on synth. I just would, chop up the stem and map it onto the keyboard and play. So it actually sounds exactly the same in those, in those instances.
Or use like VSTs too.
Yeah, for sure. But
I would say like whatever the best way of like getting there, that's what we did basically. It wasn't like there was no real like, it was like rule number 1 was like, let's try to make this as live as possible and as fun. And like, if you're watching, as fun for you, because you're seeing something that you can really like, like, okay, I see that person strumming that guitar. I know what that sound is. Like, I can visualize it. But then other than that, it was kind of just like, we're not going to.
And that was really the thought process, was like, what's the most important part of this part of the song, instrument, and that's what we're going to be playing basically. And so there are tracks where it's like a drum break and like sine bass for a while. So it was like, okay, well, how do we play that and make it interesting? And that's, I think, where it led to like, well, he's going to play it on bass, you know, and
we have to
like basically regardless of how not live the part may seem, we're going to like make it live because that's so that visually like you can tie the sound to what we're doing on stage,
Right.
That's tricky because in like a rock band, I think we kind of have similar backgrounds in that we played rock bands and went into electronic stuff and live performance that way. It's a totally different way of thinking.
Totally.
You hit the drums, it's obvious what happens, right? You see the drummer, boom, 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 and like you hear that. You see the big, Pete Townsend guitar windmill strum, and you hear the big chord. But on a synthesizer, or on a push or a MIDI controller, what you get is it's really hard to connect the sound to the visual. I mean, even from the fact when you're playing those instruments, I was playing synths in a band for a little while, and on a guitar, like, when it's on, you can kind of feel it. You can tell how loud it's going to be just by your fingers on the frets without even playing anything, right? But a synth, you don't know until you hit that key, and sometimes it's like, boom. It's like the loudest thing ever, or just a surprising sound, or there's no sound. There's so much disconnect in a lot of ways from what you hear and what you see. So that's a tough thing to consider when you're trying to present your performance. You want there to be some sort of like visual like reaction or sound reaction to what you're seeing.
Totally.
And I guess that's like a tricky one to navigate. Was there anything that helped you figure that out? Like, did you actually just go out and play and see what people reacted, or did you like film yourselves and watch, or any ways of narrowing that down?
I think I would say, so for us, our background definitely in terms of playing live music. I mean, we started playing, I don't know if we were talking about this before or after the podcast started, but I'll just repeat myself. But basically, like, we started playing classical piano first, And so I guess when we were kids, we'd do like piano recitals or whatever. And then from there, we were like, we want to play in rock bands, and then started doing that. I like eventually sort of bonded with the guitar more than I did piano and everything. So I think that at some point in putting this tour together, and just like making our album too, but maybe towards the end of the process, we sort of like came to terms with the fact that like that's always going to be our perspective, is like we're like, I don't want to say musicians first, but like live, like instrumentalists, or like, yeah, we're like a rock band first. Not that we're actually a rock band, but like that's sort of what our perspective is.
And our strength ultimately.
Yeah,
as well, I
right.
think, like what differentiates us, So.
Yeah. And then I think that, once we sort of like let that happen, it was really easy because, I got this like guitar bass like double neck thing, and I was like, I'm literally just going to play guitar and bass wherever I possibly can in our music. And we actually do like record tons of guitar in it, and there is a decent amount of like bass, but like we said, we'll just replace some of the synth bass that can turn out that way.
Yeah, basically you had to justify the massive expense of your custom double neck. So we said we better use this in every song.
Yeah. But then I think more to your question, like how do you sort of like visually translate like a synthesized sound to like something that somebody's doing on stage? I mean, we thought about like the kind of stuff that you just mentioned, like, when you see a drummer do a tom fill, you know what that is, like, where the sound is coming from. And I think that we have a lot of those references in our head from like listening to that kind of music. So that has been put into like the recordings. Like we'll be like, okay, we need like a cool like Phil Collins fill here or something like that. And then as a result, when we're going back and putting the live set together, I feel like anytime it was like, okay, this is like a cool drum part that like, we could play this pretty easily. We just got drum pads and then started.
Which is like what every electronic band does.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Drum pads. But,
and there was a time where we were like, okay, this is a house song with like a 4 on the floor beat. And we were kind of like, what if we like, built the like 4/4 kick up and then looped that. And then eventually we realized like, that's not what we're trying to do. It's like, we're trying to like, sort of play like the big noticeable parts, I would say, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I think like whatever feels the most, whatever jumps out as like a hook or whatever. And it doesn't always have to be like a melody. It could be like a cool bass line or whatever. We try to like, translate that to something that's happening visually on stage too.
And I think so before this tour, I think we just played one show, and then we had some shows before the pandemic, but basically like we did not play very much at all in this project. But one of the things I remember, the few shows we played in like 2019, for instance, thinking like, okay, we played this set perfectly fine, and yet like I don't have the feeling I felt playing in a rock band where like you get off stage and you're like, this was so sick. Like we elevated the music beyond like what the 4 of us individually thought we could do, or beyond what these songs were. Like on stage, the 4 of us playing together, and it felt like we couldn't accomplish that when we were kind of only playing like one synth part at a time, and it was mostly backing tracks. And it felt like, so throughout the whole pandemic, I feel like we were kind of like, how can we accomplish that? How can we get that feeling back of like, oh, we nailed, like this is better than last night. And it not like it versus all you could really do previously was mess up. Like you couldn't elevate anything. It was just like, I can screw this up, but if I play my very best, it's like, oh, it sounds like the record. Great. Like that's the best it can be. And I think obviously like the magic of a good live band is that it transcends the record, and it's something that can only happen like in that room on that night, And so it was really, how do we do that? And then it was just like, yeah, play everything. I mean, it's like there was a long time where like we were practicing and it sounded really bad because it was like I'm trying to play the whole drum part with my right hand and like this crazy 16th note thing with my left hand on the bass, and it took like a really long time to even be able to do, but it was like, we're going to push ourselves.
Right.
Even though the parts aren't really like difficult for the most part.
It's like the
know?
coordination of it is what's...
Yeah. And then, but at least now it's like live, and you can, you know, if you're really feeling it, like if Pat's really feeling it, you know, you're like, you know, strumming the bass like insanely, and like you can hear the difference, you know, like you can hear that it's being plucked really hard and all that jazz. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I went through this too when I started playing electronic sets. You know, I was really psyched to realize that you can play electronic music live, first of all. So I was thrilled by that. But it was the question of like, all right, how much am I going to do? How much is going to be pre-recorded? How much? I mean, because you could go to one extreme to the other, right? You can just press play and like stand there and point your fingers in the air and dance around.
Right.
You could record every single part and loop it together and build your tracks from scratch. But I found that to be as silly as just pressing the one button, because after a while, it's like, you know, you're just kind of like showing people that you can do it.
Right.
And it's not an enjoyable experience. It's like, look what I could do. I'm going to make all my songs from nothing.
Right.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
That gets boring. It took me a long time to find a spot. And for me, actually, I found playing guitar live didn't help. It was kind of like, oh, look at me. I play guitar too, guys.
Right.
Because when I was playing guitar, both my hands are full. I can't do anything else.
Right.
And you're kind of stuck on that instrument for the song, really, or at least a part anyway. So I wound up dialing it back, actually, where my early recordings were a lot of turning the knobs and effects, to the point where I would listen back and I'd say, I'm only doing this to show everyone that I'm doing something, that I'm not just checking email here.
Right.
And it became much more fun and listenable when I dialed it back. But it's a very tough balance. And I definitely sometimes, maybe depending on like how insecure I feel, you know, I kind of go seesaw back and forth.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think for us, one of the big things was in what sort of influenced doing things this way was like, initially our live set was very much built to be like a club set. Like it was like 2 hours long or something. Like it could go up to 2 hours long, and it was all our live material. And it was like, if we're playing in a club and people come in, we want to keep them in here dancing and that kind of thing. But then I think eventually DJing more, we were like, this is like a way better version of what we were trying to do with like the live club set, because it's like, you know, it's easier to sort of like to build something in that sense. I mean, not necessarily, obviously there's really incredible like clubby live electronic sets, but so yeah. And I think just like, you know, I listen to a lot of like the classic live like 90s electronic albums by like the big like electronica bands and stuff like that, and I would always listen to it and be like, it sounds like, you know, Metallica is doing like a electronic set in this like left field live album or something like that. And like that's always, in my opinion, been like what we eventually wanted to get to, which was like something that felt a little bit more punk and visceral, and not just geared towards like making people dance, but geared towards I don't know, moving you feel something. I don't really know what it is, but I feel like in the end we've made a lot more people dance with a lot of songs that we never thought, like, you know, 3-4 minute kind of like poppy dance songs that we sort of just were like, oh, we have to play this because like the vocals are catchy or something like that. And it's like, you look out and it's like, oh, there's people dancing to this. This is wild. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and going back to your kind of point about guitar and stuff, like we did spend a really long time building our set, not playing in front of people. So it's a lot of second guessing. And there were a lot of like putting songs in and out, taking them in and out. And then also like there were songs where you were playing guitar, Pat, and we were like, this isn't working. Like Your Old, for instance, you were playing guitar.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't sort of an automatic thing. It was like a constant like,
Yeah.
why does this song not sound as good as the rest? And some of them were like, oh, we're just like, the song doesn't have guitar in it, and like it shouldn't have guitar in it, and then you just like played drums instead or whatever. You know, it was like,
yeah, we basically, I mean, when you think about it, it's insane. But I think we started building the live set in either July or August of 2021. And we practiced like 3 to 5 nights a week until we went on tour in May 2022. So it's like,
ridiculous.
it was, and like these peaks and valleys of like, this is going so well. And then like, why are we doing this? This is terrible. So it was a lot of work.
Because
sure.
it was sort of learning how to play a show again.
Yeah.
Like, in a sense, because we'd never done anything like this. And so it was kind of felt like, and even the first couple times we played, it was like, I felt like I didn't know how to play like a live show. Not that I think if we had played in a rock band, it would have felt perfectly natural. And if we had gone back to playing like very like standing at a table turning knobs, that would have felt natural too. But it was like this hybrid. It was kind of challenging, and yeah, this. So it really was a struggle, I think, to figure out. And I kept adding things too. Like I would be like, even on days off on tour, I was like, I want to play this part. So like in the hotel room, I was like messing with Ableton. I was like, we have to remember to in sound check, make sure this doesn't totally break our project.
Which it often did.
Yeah. So yeah, we were constantly like changing and adding things, mostly like adding anything that we could play. Like if I had a free hand in a moment, I was like, I want to do it. And mostly too, because it was more fun. Because when, you get settled in and then you want to add more. And I think we're still working on getting more room for improvisation.
Yeah.
And so for now, we're still a little constrained in that, especially like if I'm sampling a bass line from the record. Like sometimes I would do it on the sampler so I could actually change the notes, but sometimes I was just lazy and I would do it in like drum rack. So I literally can't play any notes that weren't recorded. So like there's no improvisation there because unless you change the rhythm up, like, you're pretty locked in. So
right. And also the classic, like the wrong notes are mapped to the wrong keys because you have like different variations of this.
Well, it is nice because you can mess it up. Like,
well,
you just, if you hit the wrong note, it's just silent.
Right.
But but yeah, so constantly evolving, which is good because that was the whole point too,
right?
Was to try to have it be fresh. So
yeah, that's how I always describe my set. It's like a living thing,
right?
And it's actually the same session. Save as, and you create a new version, but you could trace its ancestry back to about like 2009, 2010.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it's I've taken things out, I've put things in. I think there was a time where it really swelled to way more than I needed, and it's
right.
I've realized like I don't need to do all this stuff, and it's only causing me more trouble.
Right.
But it is an evolving thing, so I totally get the three to 5 times a week.
Right.
Basically a year. And especially now that, you guys have 2 people too. So it might be simpler in some levels, but it's also anytime one of you changes one thing, the other guy has to react. And I didn't have to deal with that at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the benefit that we have I always try to think of like how long I've known you, but I think I was maybe like 10 and you were 7 or something.
Like 20 years basically.
Yeah. We're like very close, like family friends, and we've been playing music together since not long after that. I would say like as soon as I got my guitar. And
I remember, we made Yo Doggy Dog. That was in 6th grade. That was our first song that we made together.
Right.
So.
No,
Yo Doggy Dog.
Yeah. There were.
Nice.
Yeah. There was.
Do we have a link for that for people?
I don't know if it's public, if it's published, but
I don't think it ever was. But there was Winds of Fate before that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is like, that's very, but anyway, and we were in a band before this together, sort of a more traditional, kind of like garage and psych rock band. And, we played a lot in that band. And like, I feel like there is a bit of a sort of, telepathic thing that we have going on when it comes to music, which is really nice. So part of the you know, what you're talking about, the sort of like the downside of it can't just go straight from your brain into the computer and you're like, oh, I have this idea. But I also feel like a lot of times we're just like thinking the exact same thing. We also have, I mean, yeah, like I said, we had the same, did I say this? We had the same piano teacher growing up. It was my dad, and I feel like, I don't know. It's like, I feel like even just like music, all of the early music that I ever listened to either came from Phil's CD collection or, vice versa. It was like my CD collection going to him. So I just feel like the reference points on everything is very similar, even though I think as musicians, we're like very, very different. I mean, it definitely takes a lot of coordination, like it obviously took a lot of work, but that is one thing I think that makes it a little bit easier. Like if it feels like, oh, I'm gonna like go fix the set tonight at home, I'm just like, yeah. In fact, it's weird how the responsibilities have changed. Like it used to be me. Yeah. Oh, we started using your computer, so now it's your responsibility.
For a while, I had no idea how to use Ableton.
Yeah.
And it was just on Pat's computer, and I didn't have it, and I just would sit like in the side chair and be like, "Can you do this? Can you do this?" And then somehow it flipped. At least with the live set, it's become I'm kind of like the computer guy. The second year, like you have no idea what's.
I literally have no idea how anything is built.
The music. I don't think like our music is like super complicated by any means, but there's quite a lot going on in a lot of songs, and because we're trying to be very live and with like bass and guitar and vocals, we like we're mixing everything in the project, and so beyond just stems and everything, there is a ton of like automation, like a ridiculous amount of automation and stuff, and I have one keyboard, but I'm playing 30 different parts and certain songs. I'll be playing bass and a lead, and then in the chorus it switches, and changing things definitely messes with that as well. Like that's where I say Ableton's haunted, because we'll just like open up the project one day and be like, why is literally nothing working? It's because like 30 clips earlier, I changed the level of something and didn't have it set in the other clips, and it changes it, and it's like weirdly non-linear, like cause and effect. I don't know. It's wild sometimes, but
I think that's how I learned a lot of features, actually, because I'd open up my set and I'd be like, what the hell? Why is this all messed up? Like, and then I realized like, oh, there's automation I recorded, and I like one time in particular that really threw me for a loop, the little lock button next to the automation.
Mm-hmm.
So that button will lock the automation to the timeline, not to your audio clips.
Right.
I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
I just could not figure it out for so long, and I was like, ready to give it all up.
Right. Yeah.
But once I learned about that, I was like, here we go. And then
right.
It's a cool feature.
Yeah, for sure.
But I get what you guys are saying about how you get this like telepathic thing, for some of the people that I've played with for, many, many years. After a while, you just kind of know. You just kind of get each other, and you feel it. I get what you're up to, and kind of
exactly.
Thing.
Yeah.
That's like a really deep level of collaboration that happens over time. But the thing is, probably most collaborations don't last long enough for that to develop for one reason or another. Maybe it's a temporary thing, or maybe like there's falling outs, or there's, difficulties or artistic differences, a million things happen. How do you guys manage to keep that together? You say going like something like 20 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Have there been, I don't want to stir up.
Have there been breakups?
There have been,
There have been breakups.
And that was the last interview Bottler had.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a really cool thing that you guys have managed to do it, and you still enjoy working together, and you're challenging each other in new areas all the time, it sounds like. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think, I would say, I mean, first of all, so yeah, I mean, we were in a band for a very long time together before this. That band basically came to an end because I was like, I want to make music by myself, and then at some
Then you
point,
came crawling back.
don't even. And then Phil came crawling back. No, but and I think in terms of, so I guess it's sort of like, with that being said, I think that we both know at this point that we're here making music together because that's what we want to be doing. And it's not like maybe when you're younger and you don't have as much, like, you don't know as many musicians or like even people who like the same kind of music as you, and you meet somebody and you're like, oh, we like work in this way, and it feels kind of like you have to, you like, I can remember like playing music when I was in high school, and it's sort of being like that. Like, I didn't know anybody that liked the kind of music that I liked, and once I met those people, it was like I have to stay and make music with these people. So I think, like, at least for me, it's like I've played music with a lot of people, and Phil and I make the best music together, I think as far as, I think now, at least what I think about a lot is sort of like how to keep that collaborative spirit, because you're right. Like, obviously a lot of people, I mean, how long does the average band or group or whatever last? It's not very long.
11
And
minutes.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, to get to the point of collaboration that we're talking about, yeah, that might be 5 years in, 10 years in, whatever, where you really, you get to know somebody on that kind of level. But there's also, when you go beyond that, there's like ups and downs. And I think that's why you see bands who've been around for a long time, like doing different things and that kind of thing. So I think now it's sort of more about like, okay, we've made a ton of records together from different projects and that kind of thing. Like, how do we continue to make it fun? How do we continue to, challenge ourselves, challenge each other, that kind of thing. That's kind of like, we're in the middle. I mean, I'm in the middle of writing a lot of songs. I don't know what you're doing, but it's like
A lot of biking.
yeah, well, that's important. That kind of stuff is important. And it's like, that's really on my mind, is like, let's do something different. I don't know. I guess it's just like, I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with that, but
I'm not married, nor have I been married, but I feel like it's kind of like when you're married, we're like, yeah, you can disagree and like get into an argument sometimes, but like, you have to like go home to that person like the next day. Like, you can't just be like, fuck you and leave, So it's kind of like, I feel like on one hand that allows us to be pretty honest with each other, but on the other hand, like, we have to like respect each other because
what would the church say?
Yeah, because we don't believe in divorce. No, but yeah, I think it's like, all right, if we both know that we're kind of like here for the long haul,
Yeah.
and we know the other person feels that way, and so it does make it easier, I think, to sort of have, just because I think everyone's been in bands where like a band member's just like, screw this, and like quits. Almost, it feels like it's out of the blue, and you're just like,
Right.
and then you feel like you can't be honest or disagree with someone because you're worried that they're gonna like quit and leave you,
Right.
So I think we don't really have that fear, I guess. So
Yeah. And I think just, yeah, no, I agree for sure. Yeah, I thought I was going to say something.
I
but
got you. I mean, I know with some of the people I play with, there comes a point where you sort of get to this understanding where it's like, we like playing together, and that's why we're doing this. And we don't have to be doing it either. so when there are those disagreements, or I don't think that part works here, try something else, it doesn't feel like an attack on you and your abilities. It's just that thing you played a second ago didn't work. It's the person is so separate from it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I think too, like, this is what I was gonna say. I think, like, it's really interesting because I feel like at this point, like, I don't know if you agree, but playing music with somebody for so long, it's like a lot of what's going through my head is like, I'm just so grateful to be playing with somebody, not even somebody like, oh, that I can make such great music with or whatever, but like just to have been making music with somebody I like being around for this long. And I think that when you put things more in those like personal terms, it makes it a lot more easy to sort of, to make things work, to make things last. It's like, I think a lot about, I don't know exactly what I mean, but I think just,
You got to enjoy the company of the people you're with.
yeah,
right?
yeah. And just like, you understand the extent to which people are different. We're in a duo. It's not like we're in a band where like you sort of just like create this gel together. It's like literally just two people. And I mean, we obviously do have a relationship like that, but it just, I guess what I'm trying to say is like it transcends like the musical thing after a certain point, and it becomes just like a very personal thing, in addition to the music, obviously. Anyway, I'm just
Kind of reminds me of what you said in the email when we were going back and forth before the conversation about being going back to like being kids playing in garage bands. When you are a kid with your instrument and you're getting together with people to play, it's like your friends. And it's the same as if you were playing Monopoly or skateboarding together. It kind of doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's just a good hang. They're fun to be around.
totally.
And I found that too. In the band I'm playing with now, we kind of just started getting together. It was when it was starting to get safe and locked down, and everyone's lonely. So it's like, who cares what we make of this? But it's a great excuse to get together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like having, so at least for me, I get so in my head about whether like certain songs or parts are good, and you get totally like lost and turned around, and you have no, you like lose all reference. And I think what ends up actually being like a really good guide, certainly for live, but I think in the studio too, like a good guiding feeling is like, oh, like thinking back to like when I was 17 playing like college basement parties and like being like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like I've made it. And like what that, like, if you can essentially like get that kind of excitement and joy, like instead of thinking like, is this part good? Thinking like, oh, I'm playing this. Am I feeling something similar? Or like we're playing live and it's like on stage, am I feeling like I felt in those like basement shows when I was first like playing and totally naive and like had no expectations about anything? Like that is to me like a point in like an infinite, just like blackness of like, oh, I can follow this. Like this is like my way out,
Totally.
So I think it's obviously just more fun when you're having fun, but it's also like, I think useful as like an actual point of reference for like, am I doing good art or not? I'm sure other people have actually, they know when they're doing good art, but I have no idea
Well, I think it's so relevant. It's funny. Like I always think, I don't know if you would even remember this, but there's this like phone video of us when we were recording our song, Nobody Likes Me. And there's this like video of us like playing something back for the first time. And it's like, it's like when, I think it's when my like guitar solo comes in and that thing.
we like It was like a portamento chord going up, and then we reversed it for the
Yeah.
second time, so it like goes all down.
Right.
But
And we were like
yeah.
laughing our asses off, and I feel like those kind of things that like, you know, were probably a lot more, you know, present when you were a kid making music, like laughter and excitement and like adrenaline and like being on stage and feeling like, oh my God, like I'm really putting myself out there. What is that? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really like to feel super, you know, comfortable. I think, yeah, just going back to the old set, like, you know, I often felt like, oh, okay, like just hitting some buttons or not. I mean, obviously we're playing, but you know, so that's just to say that like, yeah, I think all of those, you know, if you're driven by excitement, laughter, you know, it's just like that's when you're doing something good. And that's obviously something that's not something that we, you know, discovered or anything. That's pretty common for artists to be chasing those kind of feelings. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There's something when you see a band play and they're having a great time.
Mhm.
I've watched bands that I wasn't even enjoying the music, but I've really enjoyed the show, the
Totally.
performance. Like, look at how much fun they're having up there.
Totally.
That is worth almost as much as like a good song in a lot of ways in a live performance, because it's an energy you're putting out, right?
Totally.
And it's really an exchange of energy with the crowd. And I think that's just such an important thing to keep in mind. Like, if you're not having fun and if you're up there miserable and uptight, it doesn't matter how good it sounds most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
You have to be
sure, there's a trade-off, but there's
right.
I've seen other shows where it was tense and uncomfortable to watch the band play. And that's not why we come out to see the band play.
Totally.
Yeah. We won't name the band, but
Are we thinking the same thing?
I think we saw a band while we were on tour. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
And they were like a band that
we love,
and we happened to be playing in the same space as them,
like the downstairs venue.
Yeah, so we went and saw them, and it was like they didn't sound bad at all. Like it was
just a bummer.
It sounded like the record, but they just looked dejected on stage and like so disinterested. And
yeah,
it was really like put a sour taste in my mouth. And you have to be like a virtuoso to like purely let your instrument speak for itself, I think, you know?
Right. I'm trying to think of,
because if you're just a normal mortal, you
right. I'm trying to think of
performing, not just playing.
If there's a good band, I mean, there are bands obviously that just stand there.
I mean, like Radiohead.
I was just thinking
Radiohead,
but they're Radiohead.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing. And yeah,
I was thinking about them too, actually, because I seen them once or twice maybe.
Yeah.
And I kind of expected them to just stand there. Like,
yeah,
they're Radiohead. They're too cool.
Right.
Like, they're
right.
the best. Like, you know,
right.
We're Radiohead.
He does
we
dance,
can stand here and be, you know, whatever we want to be, and it'd be totally acceptable. But they weren't. They were so animated. Tom York's
cool.
like shaking and going nuts and
dancing.
Yeah.
You know, all of them. Johnny Greenwood's like every single guy in that band was really having a great time. And they were in the moment, and it made it so much better. And I was totally ready to accept them just standing there being like, you people don't get our music. You know? But it wasn't like that at all. It was so cool. And I was so happy that that's how they were, because it really did just make that kind of click in my head. Like, that is such a big part of it. That
absolutely.
If you're not into your own stuff, no one is going to be into your stuff. Like, why would they be? No one would. There's no reason to care if you don't even care.
Yeah.
So.
And we've seen, like, I know we've gone, we can be sort of haters sometimes. So I know we've gone and seen people who we didn't think were very good, but they were like really had good stage presence, and like the crowd was really into it. And we've been like, and I think now it's like, oh yeah, like it's called performing. Like, the music, I mean, it literally is secondary to a certain extent, as like if you have really good stage presence, and if you're giving everything on stage, like the music. I mean, I've seen it, you know, obviously what's hot on the solos from Oli in New York, like you know, like this high school kids playing in like a garage in like this hick town, no offense, Oli, and like still think of it as like one of the best shows I've ever seen because like, you know, like the dude is what he's like. He drank like a whole handle of vodka. He was like 16. He had, like, giving himself a tattoo on stage.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't healthy, but or good for them. But it was such
Not
a show.
but
Yeah, exactly. Like it was amazing. It was epic.
That was a good. I appreciate that. Very deep reference.
But I mean, it stuck with me. That was like a decade ago, more than a decade ago. So
I just can't wait to send this to Justin and be like,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I
And they couldn't play their instruments. No offense to Han on the solos either.
But it was good though.
Right,
That's
right,
what
exactly.
like it was like cool. Bad. It was like bad post punk or something. I don't know, but it was great. But yeah, I think like. Yeah, I mean that's sort of the theme is like there's something that's really like intangible about seeing some teenagers play punk rock in a basement, you know, and it's like that's really hard to get the same kind of thing in an electronic set, and it's like but we want to have that in our set. So like how do we do that basically? And I think it just came down to like play as much stuff as we could live, not be afraid to make it like a little rock and roll, I guess, and just practice a million times so that like in the same way that you would with a band, like you play a song a million times, not because you're going to forget it, but because like the way things sort of like work themselves in and out and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean like, and just because that's how, once you're comfortable, like the stage presence comes out.
Right, then
like,
you can focus on other things besides purely like not fucking up.
Right.
And you can, jump around and bash your head on the keys and throw your guitar and all that jazz. So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That stuff became pretty apparent to me when I started doing live electronic music, you know, for lack of a better term, because I do keep, I use Session View in Ableton Live, and that I have a lot of the musical parts in there, and I'll play something over it. I sing. I actually decided to hold the microphone rather than use a stand for that, like kind of visceral, like energy of it. Like the stand here, you're kind of like moving around it, but when you're holding it, you can like walk around and stomp around. But it really surprised me that how much my energy and the energy of the crowd in response determined how well the show went, because a lot of what I had is pre-recorded. It's the same shit I played the night before or at home an hour before the show. It's the same stuff, but you put it in that energy and you bring the energy yourself, and you get hyped up on the what you're getting back from the crowd, and it's a totally different experience, and it sounds different. It really like, because I've recorded everything, all my practices, all the shows, and it's easy enough. You just hit record, so you could hear it. I mean, it was evident. Like I could jump to any one of those tracks on any practice or show, and I could tell right away if it's a live show or if it's just me, at home rehearsing through it. There's a definite change that happens. So the fact that it even happens on a lot of pre-recorded stuff is pretty incredible.
Yeah. It's funny because this is the second time I've thought of this while talking to you, but so we're signed to a label that's based in Paris, and when we played there in May or like on the tour, this was the first time that like anyone from the label had seen us live, and the like CEO of the label was like, I don't really get it, but you're like way better live than on the recording. And I think as someone who dealt almost exclusively in electronic music, there's obviously like, more to the label than just that, but mostly electronic music. It's like you're used to the live show being an enhancement of the music in other ways, like visuals or lights or like whatever it is, or perhaps you're like remixing things to like work more for clubs or whatever. But for us, we're like so used to, like that's the whole point, is like you're supposed to be better than like the band is supposed to be better live than on a recording. That's the whole point. And I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's like a lot of times a lot of the stuff is exactly the same. But yeah, maybe you're holding the mic or you're dancing or like I don't know. Sometimes I like hit my head with my guitar. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, I mean, I guess if you have the exact same mix when you're rehearsing and live, it's not this. But I think a lot of times live in front of an audience, you're more willing to be bold in your decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, you know, when we're in the studio, it's like, is this kick like 1 dB too loud? And all this stuff. And then live, it's like, just turn everything up. Like, yeah, like,
Right.
or like this part, like, yeah, like,
Yeah.
you know, in the recording, it's like, oh, well, this is the main melody in this part, but like it needs to fit nicely. And then live, it's like, that thing should be like deafening everybody.
Right.
And like, and I think it actually really should inform the way that we work in the studio, because it's like live, if it works really well live, it's probably going to work well if you're
Right.
recording it as too, you know? So I think for us at least, yeah, like the live thing, it actually makes us like more willing to be aggressive
Yeah.
in our
You get that
decisions.
spontaneity rather than the very calculated decision of let's
Yeah.
raise that 0.5 dB.
Right.
Instead
Which
of
obviously,
push the knob.
right. Like there's a lot of like really awesome electronic music that like is all about the precision and like
Right.
incredible, like, you know, placement and everything. But that's like not us.
Well, it's funny that you're saying this because, like, as we're talking about making new music for our next album, and you know, I'm working on stuff like, okay, everything's going to be on, like, basically, we're going to keep things as minimal as they would on stage, because when you're putting a live set together, you're like, well, people can't really hear these like background, like sparkly
There's like
delays,
15 extra tracks.
all
They're
these
like, why
extra
did we bother
synths.
with
Yeah,
this
just like
stuff?
take them out. So it's like that's kind of how we're going into writing this next record. Is it's like drums, bass, and then vocal and guitar or synth or whatever, and then basically everything being on 10. Not in like the, you know, this will be my second Metallica reference, but not in like the Saint Anger Death Magnetic kind of a way, but just like, you know,
Yeah.
like keeping everything, you know, in the foreground. Because like, yeah, when you're making a live set, you're not thinking like, oh, like maybe we pan this off to, like, a lot of times the console, the sound systems are mono anyway, so you're just thinking about like, how do I translate these like few little ideas to an audience, and that's kind of what's informing like our music making now. So
Well, in a live band, the most you think about panning is you set up over there,
right
and you
Right,
go
yeah.
over there.
right totally
That's about it.
totally
You know, when I did all my songs for my live set, I did them as jams. Like I was
cool.
jamming live. You know, they weren't recordings that I was transferring into. I don't even have recordings of them actually,
Oh,
except the
cool.
live performances. They were jams. So I would be like, you know, I'd have the PA going and I'm doing it like I'm going to play it live, and eventually you finesse it into what it becomes over time. And that I think helped me a lot in that I never had that stage of like trying to translate it from one
Right.
thing to the other. So
Right.
I was, a lot of the limitations that I put on my songs were based on like my controllers.
Right.
APC 40 has 8 tracks, so I'm going to use 8
Right.
tracks.
right
I don't want to
yeah,
be scrolling horizontally in
Right,
my
yeah.
session because I'll
Yeah.
get lost and I'll
Right.
start launching the wrong things.
yeah. Right.
But it was great to have that way of thinking, and it made a live performance feel good when you build it for performance from the ground up. And I think that's really what you guys did. I mean, you took your songs and decided we're not going to use the sub bass on the synth.
Right.
We're going
Yeah.
to play it, and that's probably why when you performed for the label, they were like, "Oh, this is really cool," because it's
Right.
It's not a translation; it's an actual. It's just a different thing almost.
Right. Yeah, and I think I think like it's funny that you mentioned just like setting up in a live. I mean, ideally we would love to be able to tour, like open up for somebody for like a handful of shows and like test out a lot of the live. That's like sort of like the general consensus of what needs to happen, but it's obviously logistically tricky and everything. But it would just be, that's like the goal is to like, be super old school about it, which is like, you're a band that people know, so you can tour your new material before you record it and like see what people think of it and that kind of thing. It's obviously tough to do, but that's kind of the goal, the dream.
So when you guys play, I should mention, if anyone's only listening, like right now you guys are sitting in front of a nice rack of synthesizers, and it's like you got like a drum machine or two back there. You got a modular with neon nest of cables everywhere. And you mentioned that you actually bring that with that particular patch all set up on the road.
Yep.
This is exactly like why I don't have any modular stuff, right? Because I'd be afraid that I'd get the ultimate patch, never want to touch it. But that's, you got to just kind of leave it. You mentioned like there's fear that somebody might touch it.
TSA.
Yeah.
You get the TSA notice in your little suitcase.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know. I think
you
at
didn't
some
have
point,
this oscillator in the right place. We had to switch it for security.
well, it is. I think it's funny because to me, I'm like, oh, it adds like an element of like risk and excitement to the set. But obviously, in the audience, like nobody knows what that is. So like, if it screws up, no one's like, oh, well, it makes sense. Like they're really ballsy for having a modular on stage. Everyone's just like, oh, this sounds like shit.
Right.
But
in my head, breaking a string, and be like, oh yeah, you broke your string, like whatever.
Yeah, in my head, it is. It actually was very. I think it was perfect throughout the whole tour.
Yeah.
I'm always so paranoid that I'm going to bump one of the tuners on the oscillators, and then like, I mean, I have like a tuner open in the track in Ableton, but like to tune that, they're always and the Just Friends oscillator that I use too. It's like there's no like octave. It's just one knob, and it's like 12 octaves. So it's impossible to get in tune. So it's risky. Yeah. But.
Yeah. As far as what we're sitting in front of goes, like the modular comes along. The rest of this stuff, with the exception of, I have this Behringer SH101 clone that I use as a MIDI controller.
And a keytar
MIDI. Yeah, like basically we have a song where the vocals are vocoder, and I was like, I want to be able to like stand at the front mic and do this, so we like got the keytar. But the rest of this is mostly studio stuff. Like we used to literally bring all of this with the exception of the drum machines. Like Phil would use the Pro 2, I would use the Nord, you would use the Sub Fatty. He has a Prophet 6 also. The drum machines, we have like a 707, a machine drum, and an R8, which they don't come along at all. Yeah.
And when we played in a rock band, like I played keyboard and Pat played guitar, and he had like a crazy pedal board. And like every show, like people would be coming up and be like, "Oh, your pedal!" Like people would be. This was also like maybe we're still in the height of like, no, we're very much in the height of boutique pedals. This was also the height of boutique pedals.
So this was on
in 2015,
the incline.
Yeah, and so like people would always like be so fascinated by all of Pat's pedals, and no one ever cared about like my. Actually, I had pretty crappy like Casios. But no one ever asked me about any of my synths and or keyboards, and so in this band I was like, oh sick, people are gonna like care about my gear now because like we're an electronic band, but still nobody cares. Nobody cares. So now I just do a MIDI controller because I'm like, no one cares that you have like 5 synths on stage. So
yeah, and it doesn't really using all the synths like it wasn't adding like. The most you're doing is like using a modulation wheel, sweeping the filter, like things that you could very easily map to like the fact that it's on stage is not necessarily, other than maybe the sound, obviously, but it's not necessarily adding anything. I have like 3 guitar pedals now, so it's not like, I have a lot to...
scale down.
I love when I see a guitar player with no pedals now.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I have a.
Hell yeah.
I got like a.
That's cheating though.
I'm cheating. I have that Zoya. I don't know if you know that. It's like the Empress pedal with the like mod matrix. That's like a light up grid.
Right?
Yeah. It's basically like a.
It's cheating, he said.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like impressiveness factor.
Simplicity
Right.
too.
Yeah. It's got nothing.
But would you bring the modular again next time, or would you just sample that or find a patch somewhere
I think
that's...
I would.
I think we would. We
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah.
I think also people, they're like, what is that thing? And then when you
people
start
think it's
using
a little
it,
cool.
and it's like, that's whenever you touch it is when
Yeah.
the electronics are the craziest
Right.
in the set.
Start
so.
the set by just having two ends of wires that are plugged in and making a connection like this that creates like lets signal through and distortions. That's like how the set starts. It's kind of like
Yeah,
a little
okay.
mad science-y.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I feel like
it looks awesome.
yeah.
But I guess that's also what they used to do in like the 70s and 80s with like empty Marshall stacks.
Right.
Just because it looked awesome.
Yeah, well, that's
so sick.
definitely. I mean, so much of any performing, but I think particularly with electronic music is like it's the theatrics of it. Like,
Right.
Uh-huh.
but like when there's a drum fill and I'm like playing and I grab a drumstick and I hit like the drum pad, like that was completely unnecessary. Like, it's not like it takes any skill to like grab a drumstick and hit it on the one, but it's purely like, once again, like that cause and effect. And I feel like similarly, like when it's crazy, we don't really have bleeps and bloops so much, but when it's like crazy synth stuff and I'm like turning knobs and stuff on there, it's once again, it's like, just a method of like cause and effect.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
an expensive method, but
Yeah. I mean, all this stuff, obviously, as like studio tools, they're super, super, super helpful. Obviously,
yeah,
you're sitting in front of a
you're not judging us. For any sense.
massive rack yourself as well. But it's just like, I think the focus live is for us just something different, which is what's gonna like basically what we've been saying this entire conversation. So, but
Yeah, that transfer. I mean, yeah. It looks awesome, and it's exciting to kind of it. It's fun to watch a performance, and you kind of like, what is that? What's going on? I saw Dream Theater a year or two ago, and Jordan Rudess came out with something.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? He's always into the latest gear, and
Right.
And it was fun. It was just like because he's like a wizard already, so then he comes out this like alien machine that he's making all these cool sounds off of.
Right.
It's a moment, like
Totally.
I'm talking about it right now, right?
Totally.
So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
having those moments in your show is definitely a good thing to leave people something to think about.
Right. Like, I think, there's things. I always think about like the times where like you pick up a guitar and play guitar in our set, which we haven't talked about, but Phil was like, I'm just going to like learn how to play guitar.
Learn guitar on tour on stage.
Yeah. And it was great.
I thought I learned the part ahead of time, and then like the first show we were like in Vancouver, and I like also had maybe like 3 beers, which is 1 beer too many, I guess, because I was like on stage and I put the guitar on and I was like, oh shit, like I don't know how to play guitar. Like there's all these people here.
Well, that's need that. I mean, anybody that plays any instrument,
right?
like,
You got to do it
needs
in front
that
of people. Yeah.
sort of moment, and you're like, how do I like make it so second nature that when the adrenaline kicks in and like the anxiety and all that, it's like it's still there, and that's just practice, And like practicing by yourself is different than practicing with a band, which is different than practicing in front of people. So
I have those moments all the time where if I've played a part I've played a million times, and as soon as I think about it, I'm like,
right, what are we even playing?
Where am I?
yeah, totally.
Next thing I know, it's time. And
it's tough when it gets to the point where you know it so well that you can't think about it if you try. Like you can't like if you actually stop and say like, okay, like what keys or what fret am I supposed to be on right now? Like you literally don't know because it's just muscle memory essentially. So it can be tough.
You forget it consciously, but you just know
yes,
it.
yes. It's like tough to like work yourself back from those sort of like anxiety moments. But
yeah. So, what's up for you guys next? Anything in the horizon? Anything you're working on? Anything you can talk about?
Yeah.
Top secret?
Nothing top secret, I guess.
I wish we had some top secret things, but
I know. We do. We have, okay.
Yeah.
We actually can't talk about those things.
You should always say that on this show. Oh, well, we're not going to be able to tell you everything, but
you're gonna read about it in the Times soon enough.
Right. So we have. Okay. Well, first of all, we didn't really say, but we just put out our first album in May of this year. So, that's we're still sort of like working on the cycle of release on that and everything. There's a couple like remixes coming out in the future that haven't really been announced yet, but they're coming along. We're planning on doing some more touring, which will be like next year, and like just probably things like on and off here and there as well. And then just I'm like really in the zone with like writing new music. That's like what I'm doing right now. So that should be coming along. I think our goal is to put out a new record like basically as soon as we can. The last one took like 5 years to make.
I think we're going to put out an EP as well. It's not announced.
Yeah, so we're going to put out an EP. Yeah, well, the EP of Doom.
Right.
Tentative title, the EP of Doom.
nice.
There's some sort of like leftovers from the album that are going to come out as an EP. And then there's going to be some like remixes on EPs that come out as well.
That were some of our favorite songs. They just weren't quite.
Yeah, it's not like
right.
they weren't good. It's just they didn't fit.
Yeah, arguably should have been on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, not everything fits.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is this isn't like a huge deal, but we have this live video that we shot. I think I sent it to you. That was like basically the last show of our May and June tour, which was like in our hometown, and it was like a headliner, and we packed the place and we felt very happy, and it was just like the footage came out really great. So I think the plan is for that to be out by the time, like whenever this comes out, it should be out. So
The brief funny story about that is that we like record, since we mix everything internally. We were like, all right, we're gonna just add like
this definitely has to get censored.
what? Wait, I'm not making excuses. Anyway, we made like 5 extra tracks in Ableton to like record basically like stems of the live set, and then we hired like a videographer and his assistant to come up. So it was like kind of a big production, and then we just forgot to hit record on the audio. But luckily, the videographer, being a pro, they got like board audio. But so it actually turned out good. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's just funny that afterwards, like in between like the last song on our encore, I think I was like, shit, like we did not record that. Like we just wasted a ton of money, but it worked out.
Nobody on this listening right now that hasn't done something like
Yeah.
that before.
Yeah, totally.
That's just
sure.
bound to happen.
Yeah.
Anytime you have to hit that button once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's cool. Yeah, you guys, I saw you guys, I was on, I think, Instagram, so you guys were at Pianos in New York City, and you got to let me know if you're playing any of those places.
Of course.
I've been there, played those. They're so fun out there in the village. It's
Yeah.
great little scene, and the spots are fun. I mean, cozy,
For sure.
and intimate, and good sound usually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we played the tour we did in the States. We were opening up for Rhone from Paris, who's like one of our favorites. He's a label mate of ours now. And we played Les Poissons Rouge, which was like probably the biggest venue we've played in. Yeah, definitely the
In
biggest
New York, yeah.
venue in New York we've played so far. And yeah, just like, you know, really cool vibe. Like the area is really awesome. And we tend to play like, that was our first show, I think. That and the piano show were like our first shows in Manhattan in like ages.
Mhm.
We tend to play in Brooklyn more, like, you know, Bushwick. And so, but yeah, we're definitely gonna be doing local stuff. I think we're also trying to switch gears to like DJing a little bit more as well right now, just because the focus has been on playing live so much. But I mean, we're just obviously we love to play, so we're never gonna say no to anything.
But we'll let you know.
We will definitely let you know for
definitely.
sure.
Let it
Yes.
come out.
Yeah.
I like what you guys are doing, and
Thanks.
it'd be even more fun having spoken to you about what it is you do, and yeah, I think it's cool stuff. I really do wish you guys the best, and to continue doing what you're doing. Let's see. We want to send people that want to check you guys out. It's bottlermusic.com, right?
Yep.
And you can see that like really sick double neck guitar you were talking about. Is that thing heavy? I mean, they usually are, right?
It's honestly not that heavy. It's like 12 pounds, which is like like the heaviest Les Pauls are like 10 pounds. So it's like as heavy as like a heavy, like it, to me, it feels like it's lighter than like, I don't know if you're familiar with like a Gibson Ripper or like an RD, like any of those like big, like chunky, like a Thunderbird or something like that.
Yeah.
It is bulky though.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
I feel like the weight distribution is maybe slightly.
Yes,
You just
I'm
nearly fall over.
I'm
very often
smashing it on
stage.
stuff all the time accidentally. I had to like, after our first show, I had to just be like, this is gonna like hit stuff because it's so awkward. But yeah, I have to like plant myself firmly. There have been moments where we've been on like tall stages and we're right up against the edge, and I've been like, I'm about to fall over because I keep like. Yeah. But anyway, yes, you can go to our website and see that. Everything social media wise is Bottler Music, so we're pretty easy to find.
Right. Nice. Well, Pat, Phil, I thank you both for taking the time, and again, wish you all the best. Check out bottlermusic.com, and thank you, the listener. Have a great day.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Really
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, one way you can support it is by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your music. And remember, a little bit every day goes a long way.